My name is Margaret Rose Chen. I'm 68 years old. 3 days ago, I watched them lower my only son Daniel into the ground. But before the flowers even wilted on his grave, my daughter-in-law Jessica told me I had 1 month to leave my home. The home I've lived in for 40 years. She thought I was just a poor old widow who sewed clothes for pennies. She had no idea who she was dealing with. I simply smiled, grabbed my overnight bag and walked away. The very next day, she didn't get a real estate agent knocking on her door. She got 2 police detectives. Let me tell you how I turned her whole world upside down. But first, please write in the comments where you're watching from today. And if you believe that good people should never be pushed around, please click that like button and subscribe to Granny's Voice. We share stories about standing up for what's right, no matter how long it takes. The afternoon sun was burning hot at Riverside Memorial Gardens. I stood there in my plain black dress from the thrift store, watching my Daniel's casket disappear into the earth. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. My boy was only 39 years old. How does a healthy young man just die? The doctors said it was sudden kidney failure. Just stopped working, they told me. But something felt wrong in my bones. Daniel drove a delivery truck. He was strong as an ox. Just 2 weeks before, he'd helped me carry groceries up 3 flights of stairs without even breathing hard. This wasn't right. Around me, my neighbors from Chinatown were crying. Mrs. Wu brought white flowers. Mr. Tanaka closed his restaurant to be here. These people loved my Daniel. They watched him grow up. Then there was Jessica. My daughter-in-law stood beside me wearing designer sunglasses that probably cost more than my monthly rent. She had on a tight black dress with high heels that kept sinking into the grass. I noticed she wasn't crying. Not even a little bit. While the priest talked about heaven and angels, Jessica kept checking her fancy watch. Her fingers kept tapping on her phone screen. She looked annoyed, like she had somewhere better to be. When the priest finally said his last prayer, people came over to hug me. They told me stories about Daniel, how he helped fix their cars, how he always smiled. I wanted to stay longer. I needed more time with my baby boy. But Jessica's hand grabbed my arm tight. Her long pink nails dug into my skin through my thin dress. "That's enough, Margaret," she hissed in my ear. Her voice was sharp like a knife. "Let's go. People are waiting at the house." I looked at her. Really looked at her for the first time. This woman who married my son 5 years ago. I didn't see the sweet girl Daniel brought home. I saw someone cold. Someone I didn't know at all. Back at my small apartment in Chinatown, neighbors filled every corner. The smell of dumplings and rice filled the air. Everyone brought food the way our community always does when someone dies. People hugged me. They cried with me. They shared memories of Daniel when he was little, running through the streets, helping old people carry their bags. I sat in my worn-out armchair, the same chair my husband died in 12 years ago, and I felt empty inside. Slowly, people started leaving. "Call us if you need anything, Mrs. Chen. We're here for you, Margaret." Finally, the room was quiet. The sun was going down. Orange light came through my small window. I was so tired. All I wanted was to go to my bedroom and cry alone. Jessica walked in from the kitchen. She'd changed out of her funeral dress. Now she wore jeans and a bright red sweater. She looked happy, like a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. "Okay," she said, crossing her arms. "Everyone's gone. We need to talk business now." I looked up from my chair, confused. My mind was foggy from crying so much. "Business? Jessica, I can't think about anything right now. I just buried my son." "I know," she said in a flat voice. "And that's exactly why we need to talk. Stop crying, Margaret. Stop with the sad old lady act. We need to discuss what happens next." I tried to stand up. My knees hurt. "Jessica, please. Not today. I'm exhausted. Can't this wait?" "No," she said firmly. "It can't wait. I need you to listen very carefully, Margaret. I need you to pack your things. You have 30 days to leave this apartment." The words felt like someone punched me in the stomach. I couldn't breathe. "Leave? What are you talking about? This is my home. I've lived here for 40 years. I raised Daniel here. Jessica actually laughed. It was a cold, mean sound that didn't belong in this sad place. Not anymore, Margaret. Not anymore. She walked to my kitchen drawer. My kitchen drawer where I keep important papers and spare keys. She pulled out a folder and dropped it on my coffee table. It landed with a thump. Daniel signed this document 2 months ago, she said, pointing at the papers with her pink nail. It's a transfer deed. He signed the apartment over to me. It's mine now. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely pick up the papers. I put on my reading glasses. The words were hard to read through my tears. But I saw them. The apartment address. Daniel's name as the person giving it away. Jessica's name as the person receiving it. And at the bottom a signature. It looked like Daniel's handwriting, but something about it seemed wrong. The letters were too shaky. Too careful. I don't understand, I whispered. Why would Daniel do this? He would never take away my home. Never. He was broke, Margaret, Jessica said, looking at her nails like this conversation bored her. Deep in debt. We needed money fast. The apartment was the only thing of value he had that I could use as collateral for a loan. This was a lie. I knew it immediately. I had given Daniel money 10 years ago to start his delivery business. He paid me back every single penny within 3 years. That business was doing well. Daniel was careful with money. To save. He planned. He was never careless. He wasn't in debt, I said quietly but firmly. My son was smart with money. You're lying. Oh, please, Jessica snapped. You don't know anything about his real life, Margaret. You're just the old mother he visited on Sundays because he felt sorry for you. He was in serious trouble. Helped him. And now he's dead, which makes me the legal owner of this apartment. I'm selling it. I need the money. So you have 30 days. 30 days. My voice came out as a whisper. 30 days, she repeated, leaning close to my face. Her voice became mean and scary. And if you're not gone by then, Margaret, I will call the police and have you thrown out for trespassing. Do you understand me, old woman? I just stared at her. This woman who married my Daniel. This woman who ate at my table every Sunday. This woman who smiled and called me Mom while eating my homemade dumplings. She waited until the very day I buried my son to kick me out of my home. I looked at the shaky signature on the paper. I thought about her checking her watch at the cemetery. I thought about the lie she just told about Daniel being in debt. I thought about my healthy son suddenly dying of kidney failure. And in that moment something inside me changed. The crushing sadness didn't go away. But it became something else. Something hard. Something sharp. Something focused. My hands stopped shaking. I sat up straighter. I looked right into Jessica's eyes. She was waiting for me to cry, beg, to fight back with words. Instead I just nodded slowly. Okay, Jessica. She blinked. She wasn't expecting that answer. Okay. Just like that. You're not going to argue. If that's what the paper says, I replied in a calm, empty voice, then I guess that's the truth. I don't want any trouble. Good, she said. She looked relieved but also confused. So 30 days. I want you out by the 1st of next month. I shook my head. I don't need 30 days. I stood up and walked past her toward my bedroom. She followed me looking puzzled. What are you doing? I went to my closet. I pushed past my few church dresses and old sweaters. In the very back, under a quilt I made myself, was a small black travel bag. The one I always kept ready for my trips to visit my sister in Sacramento. I pulled it out and set it on my bed. Jessica's eyes went wide. Wait, what is this? Were you planning to leave? I zipped up the bag. It already had clean clothes, my toothbrush, and a small notebook inside. I walked back to the living room. Jessica, I said in a quiet voice, you have absolutely no idea what you just started. I walked to the front door. Jessica yelled after me, and for the first time I heard panic in her voice. Wait, where are you going? You can't just leave. What am I supposed to tell people? I stopped with my hand on the doorknob. I turned and looked back at her standing in the middle of my apartment. The apartment she just stole. I gave her a small, sad smile. You'll figure it out, Jessica. You seem very good at lying. I stepped outside into the cool evening air. I pulled the door closed behind me. I heard the lock click. Then I heard Jessica laugh through the door. High, mean, victorious laugh. Fine. Get lost, old lady. Good riddance. She thought she won. She thought this poor old widow was walking away defeated, probably going to sleep on a park bench somewhere. She had no idea I wasn't wandering aimlessly. I was walking straight toward a plan. She thought she just inherited a small apartment in Chinatown. She had no clue she just declared war on a woman who owned the entire building. I didn't go to the police right away. I had a more important stop to make first. But I did make one phone call before I went to sleep in a clean, quiet hotel room across town. Called Linda Chong, my lawyer. The woman who has handled the Margaret Chen Family Trust for the past 15 years. I told her everything. What Jessica said. The fake document. 30-day threat. Linda doesn't waste time. She said, "Go to sleep, Margaret. I'll take care of the morning." And she did exactly that. Jessica probably slept better that night than she had in months. There in my bed. In the bed I shared with my husband before he died. She must have woken up feeling like a queen. She probably thought I was sleeping in a homeless shelter somewhere, a broken old woman with nowhere to go. I can imagine her walking through my apartment like she owned it, touching my family photos, looking at my furniture and deciding what to throw away. She probably made coffee in my kitchen, used my favorite mug, the one with the little painted flowers Daniel gave me for Mother's Day when he was 8. She sat at the table I bought with my first paycheck from the sewing factory 40 years ago, put her feet up on the chair Daniel used to sit in as a boy. And then she made the call she'd been dying to make. I can almost hear her voice now, all sugar-sweet and fake. "Yes, hello. Is this Golden Gate Property Sales? I'd like to list an apartment for sale right away. It's in Chinatown, a nice unit in a good building. Yes, it's empty as of last night. The previous owner moved out. Moved out. Like I was garbage she finally threw away." She was probably smiling, counting the money in her head, imagining what she'd buy when the sale went through. And that's when the knock came. It wasn't a gentle knock. It wasn't a neighbor bringing sympathy food. It was 3 hard, loud bangs on the door that made the walls shake. She was probably annoyed, ready to yell at whoever was interrupting her victory celebration. She stomped to the door and swung it open. 2 detectives from the San Francisco Police Department stood in my doorway. Detective Maria Santos, a sharp woman with eyes that missed nothing, and Detective James Park, a tall man with a serious face. They weren't smiling. "Ma'am," Detective Santos said in a professional voice, "we're looking for a Margaret Rose Chen." Jessica's smile was pure arrogance. She leaned against the doorframe like she owned the place. 'Cause she thought she did. "She's not here. She moved out last night. I'm the new owner of this property. Can I help you with something, officers?" Detective Park looked past Jessica into my living room. His eyes scanned everything. Then he looked back at Jessica. "New owner. That's interesting." Jessica's smile got tighter. She didn't like that word. "Is there a problem?" "There might be," Detective Santos said, pulling out her notebook. "We received a formal complaint this morning from Mrs. Chen's legal representative. The complaint is about illegal entry, trespassing, and unlawful occupation of this address." Linda told me later that all the color drained from Jessica's face. All that smugness just vanished. "Illegal entry. What are you talking about? This is my apartment. My late husband left it to me. I live here." She was starting to sound hysterical. "Ma'am," Detective Park said, holding up his hand calmly, "we're just here to document the situation. But that's not the only reason we came." Jessica froze. I imagine her hand gripping the doorframe to keep from falling. What other reason?" Detective Santos looked down at her notes. We also received a formal request filed this morning. It asks us to open an investigation into the suspicious circumstances surrounding the death of Mr. Daniel Chen. That was the moment. The kill shot. Jessica stumbled backward. She grabbed the door to keep from collapsing. Linda said the detectives told her Jessica's face went completely white. All the lies, all the confidence, all the victory. It shattered right there in my doorway. Suspicious, she whispered. She could barely speak. It was kidney failure. The doctors said so. That's what the initial report says, ma'am, Detective Santos said, her voice hard as steel. But Mrs. Chen's attorney believes there's more to the story. We'll need to ask you some questions. And ma'am, you probably shouldn't try to sell this apartment. It's now part of an active investigation. Jessica didn't say anything else. She just stared at them, her mind racing, finally understanding. The old lady hadn't wandered off to die in the streets. The old lady hadn't gone to beg for help at a shelter. The old lady had called her lawyer. The old lady had called the police. The old lady was fighting back. I wasn't at the police station. I wasn't sitting on a hard bench filling out forms. I was 20 floors up in a modern office building in the financial district. The offices of Chong and Associates. All glass windows and beautiful furniture. Looking down at the city I helped build. I sat in a comfortable leather chair. Holding a cup of hot tea I was too nervous to drink. My hands were steady now. The shaking stopped the moment I walked out of my apartment. Across the desk sat Linda Chong. She's 52, smart as a whip, and the only person on earth besides me who knew the truth about my late husband's business. She wore a gray suit that looked expensive. She's my lawyer, my financial manager, and like a daughter to me. Her mother and I worked together in the garment factory 40 years ago. She was on the phone. Her voice was cold and exact. Yes, Detective Santos. That's correct. Unlawful occupation. And yes, a formal request to investigate suspicious circumstances in the death of the beneficiary, Daniel Chen. Understand. Please keep me informed about your conversation with the occupant. Thank you. She hung up and turned to face me. A small, tight smile appeared on her face. It wasn't a happy smile. It was a satisfied smile. It's done, she said. The police are at your door right now, just like you asked. No arrest yet. I asked quietly. Not yet, Linda said, leaning forward. But Jessica won't sleep well tonight, Margaret. I promise you that. I nodded, taking a small sip of tea. It was jasmine, my favorite. Linda knew I couldn't handle strong coffee when my mind was racing like this. She had a paper, I said softly. She said Daniel signed the apartment over to her 2 months ago. I looked at Linda. The question I was terrified to ask hung in the air between us. Did he, Linda? Did my boy really sign it? Linda didn't answer right away. She turned to her computer screen. She typed in a password and pulled up a file. I've been busy since you called me from the hotel last night, Margaret, she said. She clicked the mouse. A document appeared on screen. It was the transfer deed. Jessica's name was listed as the new owner. Daniel sent me a scan of this 3 weeks ago, Linda said. He was confused and upset. He said Jessica asked him to sign it. Something about a bank loan. He wanted to know what it meant legally. So he did sign it, I said. My heart hurt. Hold on, Linda said. She clicked again. A second document appeared next to the first. It was a copy of Daniel's signature from his business license. She clicked again. Third document. Daniel's signature from his driver's license. I leaned forward. I didn't need to be an expert to see the difference. The signature on Jessica's deed was shaky and uneven. The letters were too round, too careful. Daniel's real signature was quick and confident, bold. It's fake, Margaret, Linda said softly. It's a forgery. And according to the handwriting expert I hired this morning, it's a very bad one. Someone traced it, but their hand was shaking. Probably from guilt. Something washed over me. It wasn't happiness. It was a deeper, colder kind of pain. My son hadn't betrayed me. But his wife had tried to frame him. So she forged his name, I said. The words tasted bitter. She tried to steal the apartment by faking Daniel's signature. Yes, Linda said. She did exactly that. She closed the file. But Margaret, that's not even the most important part. I looked at her confused. What could be more important than her committing fraud? Linda leaned back in her chair. Her fingers pressed together on the desk. Do you remember the promise you made to your husband Thomas, Margaret? Right before he died in the hospital. How could I forget? Thomas, so weak but his eyes still bright, holding my hand. Margaret, he'd whispered. We built this from nothing. From working in factories and saving every penny. Don't let some girl with a pretty smile and empty heart tear it all down. Protect our boy. Protect our work. I remember every single word, I whispered. He knew people like Jessica existed. He warned you, Linda said. Which is why the signature being fake doesn't even matter. It doesn't matter if Daniel signed that paper 100 times over. I frowned. Linda, I don't understand. She reached into her desk drawer and pulled out a large leather book. She slid it across the desk to me. Gold letters on the cover read, "The Margaret and Thomas Chen Family Trust." We set this up the week after Thomas's funeral, Margaret. Remember? You were in shock but you signed all the papers. We transferred every single thing you and Thomas owned. Every property deed. Every business investment. Every brick of every building. She tapped the cover. Including your apartment in Chinatown. The air in the room suddenly felt thin. I looked at Linda and the pieces started clicking together. The apartment. You, Margaret Chen, legally own nothing but the clothes in your closet and a small checking account I manage for you, Linda said. You haven't personally owned that apartment in 15 years. The Margaret and Thomas Chen Family Trust owns that apartment. And I am the executive administrator. A slow, cold understanding settled over me like a blanket. So even if Daniel had signed it, it would be completely worthless, Linda finished. Her voice had a grim satisfaction. You can't give away what you don't own. Daniel knew about the trust, Margaret. He sat right here in this office with us when we explained everything. He knew he was a beneficiary, not an owner. He knew the properties were protected. So Jessica tried to steal something Daniel couldn't legally give her even if he wanted to, Linda said. She's not just cruel, Margaret. She's ignorant. She was so focused on stealing that one little apartment that she never bothered to ask about what else existed. Sat back. The weight of this revelation pressed down on me. The legal victory was complete. Jessica was a fool. She had nothing. But I didn't feel relief. Instead, a new, darker question began forming in my mind. I looked out the window. Cars moved below like tiny toys. The city kept going. But my world had stopped. The fog of grief was clearing. And the sharp mind of the woman who built an empire from factory wages was finally taking over. But Linda, I said slowly, turning back to face her. That doesn't make sense. What part? Daniel, my son. He knew the paper was worthless. He knew about the trust. He was my heir. He was going to inherit everything someday. I leaned forward. My eyes locked onto hers. So why would he forge a document he knew was useless? Why go through the trouble? Why fake a signature for an apartment he couldn't legally sign away? Why would he send you that scan 3 weeks ago looking confused and scared unless? Linda's professional mask slipped. She knew exactly where my mind was going. She leaned forward too. Her voice dropped to a serious, low tone. That, Margaret, she said, is the $12 million question. The number hung in the air between us. The true value of the Chen family trust. That's the question I've been asking myself all morning. Why would he act confused about a document he knew was fake? Why would he be scared? I pause. Let the silence stretch. Let me connect the last terrible dot. My blood went cold. Unless Unless he didn't forge it, Linda said. Exactly. Unless Jessica forged it, thinking Daniel owned the apartment. Unless she was planning to force him to go along with it. Unless he sent me that scan because he was terrified. Unless he knew something was very, very wrong. She stood up and walked to the window. Stood beside me, shoulder to shoulder. We both looked down at the city below. It's all connected, Margaret, Linda said. The fake signature. The made-up debt story. The desperate attempt to grab the one asset she could see. She turned to face me. Her eyes had a cold fire I'd only seen in my husband Thomas. It's all connected to the sudden, convenient, and very timely kidney failure of a perfectly healthy 39-year-old man. She didn't just want the apartment, Margaret, Linda said, her voice like ice. She wanted it all. And Daniel, your son, was just in her way. The conference room in Linda's office was designed to intimidate. 20 floors up. One wall was pure glass overlooking the city. The table was dark wood, polished so shiny you could see your face in it. Jessica and her new lawyer sat on one side. I knew his type immediately. His name was Rick Morrison. His suit was cheap and shiny. He had the overconfident look of a man who thinks he's the smartest person in the room, especially when he's about to crush a grieving old widow. Jessica sat next to him, back in her role as the sad wife. She wore a simple black dress. She held a tissue in her hand. She wouldn't look at me. I sat across from them, silent. Linda Chong sat at the head of the table. Her files were arranged in neat stacks. She was calm, professional, in control. Rick Morrison cleared his throat. A loud, self-important sound. Let's make this quick and simple, he said. He slid a copy of the transfer deed across the table. Stopped right in front of me. My client, Mrs. Jessica Chen, is the legal and rightful owner of the apartment at 428 Grant Avenue, Unit 3B. Here is the deed signed by her late husband, Mr. Daniel Chen, 2 months before his tragic and untimely death. He leaned back, put his hands together over his cheap suit. Frankly, we are shocked and appalled. We understand you're grieving, Mrs. Chen, but you are using that grief to harass a young widow. It's shameful. Jessica let out a small, perfectly timed sob into her tissue. We're here as a courtesy, Rick continued, his voice dripping with fake sympathy. We don't want to add to anyone's pain. But my client has been subjected to police harassment at her own home based on your false accusations. That ends today. If this harassment continues, we will not hesitate to file for a restraining order. And we will sue you for emotional distress and defamation. He spread his hands wide. Now, what do you have to say for yourself? I just looked at him. I didn't say a single word. I just waited. Linda smiled. It was a cold, polite, razor-sharp smile that didn't touch her eyes. Thank you for that performance, Mr. Morrison, she said, her voice smooth as glass. I appreciate the theater. Now let's discuss actual facts. She slid a single document across the table. This, she said, is an affidavit from Dr. Robert Huang. He's a board-certified forensic document examiner. And he has already been retained as our expert witness. Rick's smug look faltered just a little. He picked up the paper. Expert witnesses can be hired by anyone. We can get our own expert. Oh, I absolutely insist that you do, Linda said. Her smile widened. But please have your expert examine the ink density. Have him look at the hesitation marks in the signature. Have him note the pressure patterns that clearly indicate slow, deliberate tracing, not a natural, fluid signature. Jessica's voice came out high-pitched and panicked. Daniel was sick. His hand was shaking. Linda raised one perfectly shaped eyebrow. Was he sick 2 months ago, Mrs. Chen? Because his co-workers at Pacific Delivery all gave statements that he was lifting heavy boxes just fine the day before he died. They all said he was in perfect health. She leaned forward. No, the signature on this deed is a forgery. And according to Dr. Huang, it's a very, very bad forgery. Rick Morrison scoffed, but I could see a bead of sweat on his forehead. That's a serious accusation. You can't prove that. It's his opinion against ours. That's the interesting part, Linda said. Her voice almost cheerful now. We don't have to prove it's a forgery. She let that sit in the air for a moment. Rick looked completely lost. What are you talking about? I'm saying we don't need to prove the signature is fake, Mr. Morrison. I'll save you the trouble of hiring your own expert. Because even if that signature was 100% genuine, even if Daniel himself came back from the dead, sat at this table, and signed it in front of all of us with a golden pen, it wouldn't be worth the paper it's printed on. Rick was now pale. What are you saying? Linda reached down and pulled out a large, heavy leather binder. It made a solid, expensive thump as she placed it on the table. Gold letters on the cover said, "The Margaret and Thomas Chen Family Trust." This, Linda said, tapping the cover, is the Chen Family Trust. It was established 15 years ago when Margaret's husband, Thomas, passed away. She looked directly at Rick. Mrs. Margaret Chen does not personally own that apartment. She hasn't owned it for a decade and a half. The Chen Family Trust owns that property. And as the executive administrator of that trust, I can tell you with absolute certainty. It is not for sale. Rick's jaw literally dropped open. He frantically shuffled through his own cheap papers. That's not possible. We ran a title search. The property is listed under Margaret and Thomas Chen. A common mistake for a lazy lawyer, Linda said. All the kindness gone from her voice. You ran a quick internet search. You didn't check the asset transfer documents filed in San Francisco County. Case number 2009-7743. It's all public record. If you had bothered to do your job properly, counselor, you would have known your client's deed is completely worthless. Rick looked at Jessica. His face was a mask of panic. He just realized his client had lied to him, had gotten him involved in fraud, had just humiliated him publicly. He stammered. A trust? What trust? She told me. She said you were just a seamstress, just a retired factory worker. Jessica couldn't hold it in anymore. All the acting, all the fake grief, all the smugness. It shattered like glass. She stood up so fast her chair screeched across the floor and almost fell over. He's right, she shrieked. Her voice echoed off the high ceiling. The mask was gone. This was the real Jessica. A trust. You're lying. She pointed a shaking finger at me. I hadn't said a single word yet. I just watched her. You're just an old woman. A seamstress. You live in that tiny apartment. You wear old clothes. You ride the bus. You don't have a trust fund. She was breathing hard, her eyes wide with panic and rage. You're a liar. You're a broke old lady and you're making this up. Linda Chong didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She let Jessica's scream echo and fade into heavy, shocked silence. Rick Morrison looked back and forth between Jessica and Linda, trying to find his footing on ground that was turning to quicksand. This is. If there's a trust, we demand to see proof. Documentation. Linda simply crossed her arms. Her calm was more frightening than Jessica's screaming. "Oh, Mr. Morrison," she said, her voice full of pity. "You still don't get it, do you? You're still thinking small. You think this is about one little apartment." She shook her head slowly. "Your client screamed that Mrs. Chen is just a retired seamstress. She's absolutely right. Margaret is very proud of the work she did with her hands. She's also the woman who, over the last 40 years, quietly bought up the buildings that housed those factories she worked in." Linda turned her gaze to Jessica, who was still standing, breathing hard, her face red and splotchy. "Jessica, you've been in San Francisco for what, 6 years? You see the new restaurants. You see the tourists. You see the money. But you never bothered to ask who owned the land before it became fashionable." "Margaret and her husband Thomas," Linda said, her voice cutting through the silence, "started buying property in Chinatown when nobody else wanted it. They bought buildings in the Tenderloin when it was dangerous. They believed in this city. They didn't just work here. They invested in it. Linda counted on her fingers. As of this morning, the Chen Family Trust holds the deeds to 8 apartment buildings in Chinatown. It owns 2 commercial properties near Union Square. It also, she paused, gesturing around the beautiful office, owns the land this entire building sits on. My law firm pays rent to the Chen Trust every single month. Jessica's face went from red to a sick, chalky white. Her knees buckled. She collapsed back into her chair. Rick Morrison made a small choking sound like he couldn't breathe. I had been silent this whole time. I had watched this woman who married my Daniel. This woman who checked her watch at his funeral. This woman who tried to throw me out of my home. I watched her realize the truth. Now it was my turn to speak. I leaned forward, placed my hands rough from 40 years of sewing, on the polished table. It was the first time I'd spoken. My voice was quiet. But in the dead silence of that room, it sounded like thunder. We lived simply, I said. Jessica flinched like I'd yelled. My husband Thomas and I, we didn't believe in showing off. We didn't wear fancy jewelry. We didn't drive expensive cars. We didn't need to. We believed in hard work. We believed in saving. We believed in investing wisely. I looked directly into Jessica's terrified eyes. My son Daniel knew all of this. He knew every detail. I was teaching him how to manage the properties, how to read financial statements, how to be a good steward of what his father and I built. He was my heir, I said, letting the words sink in. He was being trained to take over the entire portfolio, an estate, Jessica, valued at approximately $12 million. Silence. Complete, total silence. Jessica didn't just sit down. Jamil. She fell back into her chair. Her mouth opened in a silent scream of shock. $12 million. She had married a $12 million heir and never knew it. She'd been so focused on stealing his old car that she never realized he was set to inherit the whole parking lot. She had tried to forge a deed for a $200,000 apartment, not knowing he was going to inherit an empire. The look on her face wasn't just shock. It was the agony of greed, realizing what it had missed. Rick Morrison was staring at me, his cheap notepad forgotten. He looked like he might throw up. So you see, Linda continued, her voice sharp again, picking up right where I left off. We really don't care about that little apartment on Grant Avenue. You can't have it, obviously. The trust will take possession by end of business today. But the apartment, she waved a dismissive hand, is no longer the point. Brenda looked up, confused. Her mind still reeling from the numbers. What's the point? Linda leaned all the way across the table, her eyes like black ice. The point, she said, is that we are very, very interested in why you felt the need to forge your husband's signature. We are very interested in why you lied to your own lawyer about debts that didn't exist. And we are extremely interested, her voice dropped to a whisper, in why my client's son, a perfectly healthy 39-year-old man, suddenly and mysteriously died of kidney failure right after you realized you couldn't get your hands on his inheritance. The panic that flashed across Jessica's face was no longer about money. It was about something much worse. It was the terror of being caught. I don't know what you're talking about, she stammered, grabbing for her purse, her eyes darting to the door. His death was an accident. It was natural. It was kidney failure. The meeting with Jessica and her lawyer ended less than an hour ago. Rick Morrison had practically run out of the room, dragging a shocked Jessica behind him. They didn't say goodbye. They just fled. Now Linda's office was quiet again. The rush of confrontation had faded, leaving behind the cold, ugly truth. My son was dead. And his wife almost certainly killed him. The conference room door opened. Linda walked in, followed by a man I didn't know. He was a large man, built solid like a tree trunk. He wore a rumpled suit that looked slept in, but his eyes were sharp and alert. He looked like someone who'd spent years watching people and catching every little detail. Margaret, Linda said. This is Raymond Torres. Ray, this is my client, Mrs. Margaret Chen. Raymond, or Ray as he introduced himself, shook my hand. His grip was firm but gentle. "Mrs. Chen, I'm very sorry for your loss. Linda tells me you're in a difficult situation." "Ray is the best," Linda said, sitting down at the table. "He was a detective with SFPD for 18 years. Homicide Division. Now he finds things for people like us. Things the police don't have time to look for." Ray nodded. He pulled out a small worn notebook and a pen. He didn't say anything. He just waited, his eyes on me. He was a professional listener. I took a deep breath. Felt strange talking about my family this way. Like a betrayal. But Daniel was gone. The time for protecting feelings was over. This was about justice. "Jessica, my daughter-in-law," I started. My voice still rough from crying. "She said Daniel was in debt. That's why he supposedly signed the apartment over to her." Ray just nodded. "Writing notes." "Supposedly," I said firmly. "It's a lie. My son Daniel was a good boy. He was smart with money. He built his delivery business from nothing with a little help from me to start. But he wasn't reckless. He wasn't a gambler. He wasn't foolish." Pause. The next words were hard. "But he was blind when it came to her. He loved Jessica so much he couldn't see who she really was." I remembered a conversation last Christmas. Me and Daniel in my tiny kitchen, the smell of dumplings filling the air. "Ma," he'd said, "you worry too much about Jessica. She just likes nice things. There's nothing wrong with that. That woman spends money like water, Daniel." I told him. "Her eyes are always hungry. Always wanting more." He just laughed. "Ma, you're old-fashioned. Jessica is ambitious. That's a good thing. No harm." I pushed the memory away. "I warned him," I told Ray. "He didn't listen. Now she says he was in debt. I want to know the truth. I don't believe my son owed anyone money. Believe SHE did. I want you to check her finances. Hers, not his." Ray wrote in his notebook. "Check wife's financial history. Gambling. Credit cards. Got it." Linda leaned forward. Her voice pure business now. "Ray, here's the situation. Jessica produced a forged deed for Mrs. Chen's apartment. She did this immediately after her husband's sudden death from reported kidney failure. She believed Margaret was a poor seamstress with one small apartment. She discovered today that Margaret is actually the principal of a $12 million trust. And that her late husband was the sole heir." Ray's face didn't change, but his pen stopped moving for just a second. He looked up at Linda. "12 million. Exactly," Linda said. "And she had no idea. Which means she was desperate enough to commit fraud and possibly murder for a $200,000 apartment. That's quite a motive." "It gets better," Linda continued. "Daniel had already started divorce proceedings. And he changed his will 4 days before he died, cutting her out completely." Ray let out a low whistle. "So she knew she was about to lose everything. No husband. No apartment. No inheritance. And I'm guessing a mountain of bills." "That's what we need you to find," I said, my voice firm and clear. "Jessica said Daniel was in debt. I say she was the one drowning in debt. Find that debt. Find out who she owed. Find out how desperate she really was." Linda handed him a thick file. "Here's everything we have on her. Social security number. Bank accounts we know of. Her car registration. Her workplace history. I want to know everything, Ray. I want to know what she bought at the grocery store. I want to know every phone call she made. I want to know if she purchased any unusual medications or chemicals. I want to know if she Googled how to cause kidney failure on her computer. Linda," I added, my voice breaking just a little, "I want to know why. Why she would do this. Why she would throw everything away. She had him. She had my son's love. Why wasn't that enough?" Ray closed his notebook. He looked at me. And for the first time I saw something beyond professionalism in his eyes. I saw the eyes of a man who'd also seen the worst of humanity. "Mrs. Chen," he said, his voice deep and steady, In my experience, for people like her, love is never enough. Love doesn't pay off gambling debts. Love doesn't satisfy greed. He stood up, tucking the file under his arm. I'll start with her financial records. Gambling debts, credit cards, loan sharks. Then I'll trace her movements for the last month. Where she went, who she talked to. I'll pull security footage from that pharmacy you mentioned, Linda. I'll find her creditors. He looked at me. You're right, Mrs. Chen. Your son wasn't in debt. She was. And when you're drowning in that kind of hole, you don't need a reason to do terrible things. You just need an opportunity. Linda spoke up. Find everything, Ray. I want enough evidence to bury her. This isn't just about an apartment anymore. I understand, Ray said. This is about murder. He nodded at me once. Sign of respect. Then he was gone. Linda and I sat in the silence he left behind. The first move was made. The first stone was thrown. Now we just had to wait for the ripples to spread. He's good, I said quietly. He's the best, Linda replied. He'll find the truth. I looked out the window again. The city sparkled in the afternoon sun. It looked so peaceful from up here. But I knew that down there, walking those streets, was a predator. A woman who had smiled at my son and then poisoned him. She called me old lady, I said quietly, mostly to myself. What? Linda asked. Jessica. At the apartment after the funeral. She kept calling me old lady. She thought I was just a poor, sad old woman. She thought I was weak. She thought I didn't know anything. She thought I was stupid. I turned away from the window and looked at my lawyer. A cold, hard determination settled in my bones, giving me strength. She's about to learn how wrong she was. Linda's office was quiet. 48 hours had passed since our meeting with Jessica. 48 hours of me pacing my hotel room, waiting. Linda had been working non-stop, making calls, sending emails, building our case. I had just sat in that quiet hotel room, staring at the San Francisco skyline, thinking about Daniel, thinking about 39 years gone. Ray Torres was punctual. At exactly 9 in the morning, he knocked once and entered Linda's office. He carried a thin briefcase and that same worn notebook. He looked tired, but his eyes were alert and focused. He nodded at me and Linda, sat down, opened his file. He didn't waste time on small talk. Mrs. Chen, Ms. Chong, he began, his voice a low rumble. You asked me to find out if Jessica Chen was in debt. And was she? Yes. My voice rough with anticipation. Ray looked at me directly. Mrs. Chen, your daughter-in-law wasn't just in debt. She was drowning in it. You said she was pretending to be a grieving widow, Linda said, her hands folded on the desk. Well, Ray said, her grief took her on a little trip. The day after the funeral, the day after she kicked you out, she got in her car, a car Daniel paid for, and drove 6 hours south. He slid a grainy photograph across the table. It wasn't a professional photo. It was taken from a distance, slightly blurry. Jessica. She was standing at a roulette table. Stacks of chips in front of her. She wasn't crying. She looked desperate. Her eyes glued to the spinning wheel. Where is this? Asked, my stomach churning. Main floor of the Pechanga Resort Casino in Temecula, Ray said. Taken 14 hours ago. She was there all night. And she wasn't just gambling. She was losing. Badly. He slid a second photo across. This one was outside, under harsh yellow parking lot lights. Jessica was backed against her car, looking terrified. Standing in front of her was a large, threatening man in an expensive suit. He was smiling, but it wasn't a friendly smile. Who is that? Linda asked, leaning closer. His name is Marco Big Marco Delgado, Ray said. He's not a casino employee. He's a loan shark. Operates out of Los Angeles. He looked very unhappy. My contact at the casino said she was begging for more time to pay. So I was right, I said, my voice heavy with sadness and anger. She's in deep. You don't know the half of it, Ray replied. He flipped open his notebook. You said she claimed Daniel was in debt. That was the first thing I checked. He looked at me and his eyes softened just a little. Your son, Mrs. Chen, he was spotless. Perfect record. His delivery business was profitable and growing. His credit score was 820. He had zero debt except for his truck payment, which was current. He was a model citizen. Just as we thought, Linda said. But Jessica, Ray continued. Jessica is a financial ghost on paper. She has no official credit cards in her name. No car loans. No mortgage. Nothing. Which is very strange for a 35-year-old woman in 2025. She always said Daniel handled all the finances, I murmured. He did, Ray said. But not the way you think. He was paying for her life, rent, food, her car. But he wasn't paying for her habits. I had to dig deeper. I pulled records from offshore accounts. Online gambling sites based in the Cayman Islands. That's where I found the real story. He turned a page in his notebook. Mrs. Jessica Chen has 4 active high-interest credit lines with offshore gambling sites. She's been moving money between them to cover losses, kiting checks, and she's been losing big for over 2 years. Linda leaned forward, her voice like ice. How much, Ray? Ray looked at both of us. As of this morning, between the online sites and what my source says she owes Big Marco Delgado, she's in the hole for $215,000. $215,000. The room went cold. Daniel's entire life savings wouldn't even cover half of that. And Margaret's trust, Linda whispered, is worth $12 million. She was sitting on a gold mine and couldn't touch a penny, Ray said. It gets worse, he continued. She tried to access it. I found 5 rejected loan applications from the last 2 months. All attempts to get home equity loans against your apartment. All forged using Daniel's name and social security number. The banks rejected them because the property isn't in his name. They flagged them as fraud. So she faked the deed, I said. The pieces clicking together in my mind. She faked the transfer deed thinking she could use the apartment as collateral to pay off Marco. Exactly, Ray said. She was desperate. She was out of time. She was trying to grab any asset she could see. But Daniel found out. Linda looked up sharply. The argument. You found security footage. I did, Ray said. He pulled a small laptop from his briefcase and turned it around to face us. From the Walgreens on Stockton Street. The night he died. The 911 call came from their apartment at 9:47 p.m. This footage is from 8:30 p.m. He pressed play. There it was. Daniel's familiar white delivery van parked under the bright lights of the pharmacy. Daniel was in the driver's seat. Jessica was in the passenger seat. There was no audio, but we didn't need any. The scene inside that van was violent. Daniel was yelling. His face dark with rage I'd never seen in my gentle son. Not once in his entire life. He was shaking. His whole body rigid with anger. Jessica was screaming back at him. Her face twisted and ugly. Oh my God, I whispered. My hand coming to my mouth. What's that in his hand? Linda asked, pointing at the screen. Watch, Ray said. Daniel roared something we couldn't hear. He took a thick stack of papers and threw them. Hurled them right into Jessica's face. White pages exploded in the van. Scattered across the dashboard and her lap like confetti. Jessica recoiled as if she'd been slapped. Then she started screaming back. Pure fury. Trying to grab the papers. Her hands clawing at them. Daniel pointed a finger right in her face. His arms straight. Shaking. Yelling, yelling, yelling. Then he slammed both fists on the steering wheel so hard the whole van rocked. He was telling her it was over. I knew my son. That was the end. Ray paused the video. He froze it on Daniel's angry, heartbroken face. He drove off 3 minutes later. Less than an hour after that, Jessica called 911 to report her husband was unconscious and not breathing. I stared at the frozen image of my son's face. The papers. What were those papers, Ray? Was it the forgery? The gambling debts? That's what I thought at first, Ray said. But the deed was just 1 page. Bank statements might be a few pages. But this was thick. At least 30-40 pages. It looked official. Legal. I was stuck. I spent all of yesterday trying to figure out what those papers were. Then it hit me. If Daniel found out about the forgery and the debt, what's the first thing a smart man does? Linda's head snapped up. He doesn't just yell in a parking lot. He protects himself. Exactly, Ray said. He calls a lawyer. But he didn't call you, Ms. Chong. You manage the trust. This was personal. This was marital. A divorce attorney, Linda whispered. Bingo, Ray said. I checked Daniel's private cell phone records for the last month. He made 6 calls to a number I didn't recognize. Family law office in Pacific Heights. A high-priced specialist named Catherine Wu. Very discreet. Very expensive. A divorce lawyer, I said. The word felt strange. Daniel. He was finally leaving her. A terrible sadness mixed with sharp relief washed over me. He was getting out. He was going to be free. It looks that way, Mrs. Chen, Ray said. I went to that office yesterday morning. I showed Miss Wu my credentials. Explained the circumstances. She was hesitant at first. Attorney-client privilege. But when I mentioned the words suspicious death and $12 million trust, she became much more cooperative. Ray reached into his briefcase and pulled out one final file. A thin legal-sized envelope. He slid it across the table. What is this? Linda asked, her hand resting on it. Those, Ray said quietly, are the papers Daniel threw in her face. My hand trembled. Linda opened the flap. Pulled out the contents. My God, she whispered. She laid them on the table carefully. The first one was a petition for dissolution of marriage. Filed 3 days before he died. The second one was a new will. The lawyer said Daniel was so proud when he signed it, Ray said, his voice gentle. He told her he was finally protecting what his parents built. He was protecting you, Mrs. Chen. I reached out with a shaking hand and touched the paper. It was Daniel's new will. Simple. 1 page. Clear. It revoked all previous wills. It stated in bold, simple language that 100% of his personal estate, his business, his van, his savings, everything outside of the Chen family trust, was to be left to his mother, Margaret Rose Chen. Jessica's name was nowhere on it. She was erased. Completely. I looked at Linda. She looked at me. The final, terrible piece of the puzzle clicked into place with a sickening clarity. Jessica didn't just know she was in debt. She knew she was being divorced. She knew she was being cut off. She knew she was being disinherited. She wasn't just losing an apartment. She was losing everything. And that night at that pharmacy parking lot, Daniel had handed her the proof. He had handed her, I realized with horror, her own motive for murder. Ray sat across from me in Linda's glass-walled conference room. The file in his hand was thin, but it felt as heavy as a tombstone. $215,000, Ray said. His voice that low rumble that seemed to shake the table. That's my conservative estimate. It's probably closer to 250,000. I just nodded. The number didn't shock me anymore. Just fit. Like the last piece of a puzzle I never wanted to solve. Big Marco Delgado doesn't like to wait, Ray continued. He'd given her until the end of the month. That was 3 days after Andre died. She was completely out of time and out of options. Linda, who had been standing by the window looking down at the city, turned around. Her face was grim. Which brings us to these, she said, walking back to the table. She was holding a manila envelope. It wasn't from her files. It was from outside. Catherine Wu, the divorce attorney Ray found, gave these to me this morning. She said Daniel was upset when he came to her. He was angry, yes, but he was also frightened. He told her he thought Jessica was capable of anything. My hands clenched on the table, my nails digging into my palms. He was right. Yes, Linda said softly. Miss Wu said that after Daniel signed the documents, he asked her to keep the originals safe in her office. He said he was going to give Jessica copies. He wanted to do it in person. He said, she needs to see it with her own eyes. She needs to know it's really over. Linda looked at me. These, she said, tapping the envelope, are the originals. These are the papers Daniel threw in his wife's face less than 2 hours before she called 911. My breath caught in my throat. I watched as Linda's slim, steady hands opened the flap and slid out 2 documents. She pushed the first one toward me. I didn't need my reading glasses to see the large, bold letters at the top. Petition for dissolution of marriage. I traced the names with my finger. Daniel Chen, petitioner. Jessica Chen, respondent. I saw the date it was filed with San Francisco County Superior Court. 3 days before he died. He did it, I whispered. A terrible aching sadness washed over me like a wave. He was finally leaving her. He was getting free. He was Margaret, Linda said. He was getting out. He was protecting himself. And he was protecting you. She pushed the second document toward me. This one was different, simpler. I read the title, Last Will and Testament of Daniel Thomas Chen. I looked at the date. 4 days before he died. Signed, witnessed, and notarized in Catherine Wu's office. My eyes scanned the text. It was short and direct, just like my boy. I, Daniel Thomas Chen, hereby revoke any and all former wills and testaments. I read the next paragraph. I give, devise, and bequeath 100% of my personal estate, including my business-specific delivery services, all bank accounts held in my name, my vehicle, and all personal effects to my mother, Margaret Rose Chen. I read it again, and again, looking for the name that wasn't there. Jessica's name was gone. She was completely, totally, and legally removed. The room was silent. The only sound was the distant hum of the city 20 floors below. I looked at the divorce papers. I looked at the new will. I thought about Ray's words. $215,000. I thought about the forged deed. I thought about that grainy video at the pharmacy parking lot. My son, his face dark with rage, throwing these very papers at the woman screaming at him. He wasn't just yelling at her. He was showing her. He was showing her the end of her entire world. I looked up at Linda. The cold, hard certainty finally settled in my heart, sharp and heavy as a piece of steel. She knew, I said. My voice was no longer trembling. It was dead calm. That night, I said, in that van she knew. She wasn't just losing an apartment she couldn't steal. She was losing absolutely everything. I stood up. The chair scraped back. I walked to the glass wall, looked down at the city, all those moving cars, all those people living their lives, not knowing what was happening up here in this office. The divorce meant she got nothing from him while he was alive. The will meant she got nothing from him after he was dead. The debt meant her creditors were going to hurt her. She had nothing, I whispered. He had just handed her proof that she had absolutely nothing left to lose. I turned around and faced them. The grief was still there, a burning coal in my chest. But now it was surrounded by cold, righteous fury. Linda stood up, her face a mask of controlled rage. That's right, Margaret, she said, her voice shaking with emotion she was fighting to control. This is no longer about a forged signature. This isn't about fraud. This isn't about an apartment. She walked over and put her hand on my shoulder. This, she said, is motive. This is premeditation. This is murder. Jessica was in my living room. My living room. When the courier arrived. She was probably already planning how to redecorate once she sold all my furniture. She signed for the large legal envelope with an annoyed scribble, probably thinking it was just more useless paperwork from her incompetent lawyer. She tore it open with one of her long pink fingernails, pulled out the documents, I wish I could have seen her face in that moment. She read the first page. A formal notice from Linda Chang's law firm informing her that a civil investigation was underway regarding the fraudulent transfer deed. She probably rolled her eyes. Old news. Then she read the second page. A copy of the report from Dr. Robert Huang, the forensic document examiner. It detailed in cold scientific language exactly how the signature was a forgery. It mentioned hesitation marks, unnatural pressure, clear evidence of tracing. Her heart probably started beating faster then. Then she read the third page. A sworn affidavit from Catherine Wu, Daniel's divorce attorney. It stated that Daniel had retained her services to begin divorce proceedings 3 days before his death. Jessica's breath probably caught in her throat right then. Then she read the fourth and final page. A certified copy of Daniel's new will. The will that left her with absolutely nothing. The papers must have slipped from her fingers, fluttered to the floor. She wasn't just losing the apartment. She had already lost everything before Daniel even died. Her entire plan had been for nothing. She was trapped, exposed as a fraud. I can see her now pacing my floor, panicking, the walls closing in. She probably thought about the police, about the questions they'd asked, suspicious circumstances. She probably thought about her debts. $215,000. Big Marco Delgado. The deadline was coming. She wasn't just going to be broke. She wasn't just going to be homeless. She was going to jail. And then she would have thought about Daniel. About his death. About that kidney failure. She would have realized that Margaret and Linda weren't just investigating the apartment. They were investigating her. They were looking for a murderer. She was completely and totally cornered. All the facts, all the money, all the law. It was all on my side. She had no way out. So she did what cornered animals do. She decided to fight back the only way she knew how. She couldn't fight me with facts. The facts would put her in prison for life. She couldn't fight me with money. She just learned I had all of it and she had none. So she decided to fight me with the one weapon she had left. The one weapon she knew might work. She would fight me in the court of public opinion. She would change the story. This wouldn't be about a grieving mother seeking justice for her murdered son. No. She was smarter than that. She picked up her phone. Her hands were probably shaking. But not from fear anymore. From rage. From desperation. She scrolled through her contacts, past the loan sharks and the bookies, until she found a name. Tracy Mendez, Channel 7 News. A local reporter she'd met at a party once. A woman she knew was always hungry for a sensational, emotional story. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes. And when she opened them, she was no longer the panicked fraud. She was the grieving widow. She summoned tears to her eyes. Pressed the call button. "Tracy," she whispered, her voice cracking perfectly. "Tracy Mendez. It's Jessica Chen. Daniel's wife." He paused. Let out a perfectly timed sob. "Yes, thank you. It's been a nightmare. Thank you so much for your kind card." Another pause. Letting the silence build. "Tracy, I'm so scared. I didn't know who else to call. Something terrible is happening. It's my mother-in-law, Margaret Chen. Yes, the one who owns all that property. She's trying to take everything from me. Tracy, I'm a widow. My husband has only been in the ground for 4 days. And she's trying to throw me out into the street. She's saying I forged papers. She's saying, God, she's saying I'm a criminal." She was crying for real now, I'm sure. Tears of pure manipulative genius. "I don't know what to do. I'm just a young grieving widow, Tracy. And she's this rich, powerful older woman. And she's trying to destroy me. She's using all her money, all her lawyers, and I have nobody. Please, can you tell my story?" She listened, then nodded, wiped away her fake tears. "Yes, I can be ready in an hour. Thank you, Tracy. You're saving my life." She hung up the phone. The tears stopped instantly. Her face, I imagine, set into a mask of cold, hard calculation. She couldn't win in a court of law, so she was going to put me on trial on the 6 o'clock news. Let's see how San Francisco likes this story, she probably whispered to my empty, silent apartment. Let's see them turn against the rich, greedy landlord. I was in my hotel room when Linda called me. She didn't say hello. She just said, "Turn on channel 7. Right now." I fumbled for the remote, my hand shaking. The hotel television flickered on. The 6 o'clock news. There was my building. My apartment building. The one Thomas and I saved for 10 years to buy. And there was Jessica. She looked small, fragile, vulnerable. She was wearing a simple white blouse. No makeup. Her hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked like a victim. She was dabbing her eyes with a crumpled tissue as she spoke to the reporter, Tracy Mendez. The reporter's face was all professional concern. "I just don't know where else to turn," Jessica whispered, her voice cracking perfectly on camera. "My husband Daniel. He's only been gone for a few days." She broke down. A sob caught in her throat. The camera zoomed in on a single tear rolling down her cheek. "Perfect." The reporter put a sympathetic hand on her shoulder. "Mrs. Chen, you've made some very serious claims. Can you tell our viewers what's happening?" Jessica took a shaky breath. "It's my mother-in-law, Margaret Chen." She said my name like it was poison. She's trying to kick me out of my own home." The reporter looked shocked, her eyes wide. "She's evicting you? Just days after you buried your husband?" "Yes," Jessica cried, the tears coming faster now. "She's a very wealthy woman, a real estate investor. She owns buildings all over Chinatown. And I'm just a widow with nothing. And she wants to take the one thing my husband Daniel left me. This apartment." I couldn't breathe. I just stared at the screen. She was brilliant, evil but brilliant. "She never accepted me," Jessica continued, looking right into the camera, into the eyes of every person in San Francisco watching. "She never thought I was good enough for Daniel. She never welcomed me into the family." He paused, as if gathering courage to say the next part. "Maybe it's because I'm different. I'm not from her world. I don't have her power. I don't have her money." There it was. She did it. She actually played that card. "And now that Daniel is gone," she sobbed, "there's nobody left to protect me from her. She's punishing me for loving her son. What am I supposed to do? How can a young, grieving widow fight against a powerful real estate mogul like that? She has teams of expensive lawyers. Have nothing. Just my husband's memory. And she's trying to steal that too." The reporter, Tracy Mendez, looked directly into the camera, her face filled with outrage. "A truly shocking accusation. Mrs. Chen, are you saying you're being forced out onto the street?" "She gave me 30 days, Jessica whispered, as if the words were too painful to speak. 30 days. Right after the funeral. She told me to pack my things and get out. Please, somebody help me." The screen cut back to the news anchor in the studio, his face a mask of disbelief and sympathy. "A heartbreaking story. We reached out to Mrs. Margaret Chen's representatives for comment, but have not yet received a response." Linda's phone started buzzing in my hand. I had thrown mine against the hotel room wall. Shattered. Her office line, her cell phone, the hotel phone. They were all ringing, nonstop. A storm had just broken over my head. Linda clicked off the television. The silence in her office was deafening. She looked at her buzzing phone on the desk. The screen was lit up. A local news blog. The headline read, "Grieving Widow versus Chinatown Real Estate Mogul." She swiped to another one. "Wealthy landlord tries to evict dead son's wife." "She did it," I said. My voice was dangerously quiet. "She's standing in front of my building. In front of my home. The home Thomas and I worked 40 years to afford. And she's telling the entire city I'm a monster." I stood up and walked to the window. Looked down at the city. My city. "After what she did," I said, my voice shaking now with rage. After killing my Daniel, she dares to paint herself as the victim. She's making me look like the villain on television. Yes, she is, Linda said, her voice surprisingly calm. Get on the phone, I ordered, turning from the window. Call the station. Call every station. We'll tell them the truth. We'll show them the will, the divorce papers, the $215,000 gambling debt. We'll destroy her story. Linda held up a single steady hand. No. The word stopped me cold. No. What do you mean no? Margaret, listen to me, Linda said, her voice cutting through my rage like a knife. This is exactly what she wants. She's cornered. She has no facts. She has no legal case. She can't win in a court of law. So she's trying to win in the court of public opinion. She wants a media fight, Linda continued. She knows if we jump into this mess with her, we just get dirty. We'll look like we're attacking a poor grieving widow. We'll be proving her point. So we just let her. I practically shouted. We let her lie. We let her do this to me. We let her talk, Linda said, a cold, hard smile forming on her lips. We let her go on every show that will have her. We let her cry her fake tears all over San Francisco. We let her lie and lie and lie. Why? I demanded. Because she's not just lying, Margaret, Linda said, her eyes sharp and focused. She's committing perjury before she even gets to a courtroom. Every single word she says on television is another lie we can disprove with facts. She's building our case for us. She's hanging herself with her own words. She picked up her phone. Ray is still working. He's not looking for gambling debts anymore. He's talking to the medical examiner's office. He's pulling the 911 call recording. He's tracing the money trail. He's finding every lie she's ever told. Linda looked at me, her eyes as fierce as my husband Thomas's ever were. Jessica thinks she's playing checkers on the evening news. We're playing chess in a federal courthouse. So let her talk. Let her slander you. Let her cry to the entire city. She walked over and stood next to me, shoulder to shoulder, looking out the window together. We will not respond on television, Margaret. We will respond in court. With a forged deed. With the divorce papers. With a new will. With the gambling debts. And, she took a deep breath, with the medical examiner's final autopsy report. And when we do, Linda said quietly, we will not just clear your name. We will take away her freedom. I looked at the city lights twinkling below. The rage in my chest slowly cooled, hardening back into that block of ice. She was right. Her talk. Let her perform. Let her lie. The truth was coming. And it would be unstoppable. The San Francisco County Superior Court is a cold place. It's not like on television. The marble floors are old and worn. The air smells like old paper and floor polish. I sat on a hard wooden bench next to Linda. I wore my best dress. The one I wore to Thomas's funeral. The one I wore to Daniel's funeral. Across the courtroom sat Jessica. She was back in her widow costume. A simple black dress. A delicate veil over her face. She held a tissue. She was still performing. Her lawyer, Rick Morrison, was strutting around in front of the judge's bench like he owned the place. He was performing too. The courtroom was packed. That reporter, Tracy Mendez, was in the front row. Her camera crew in the back. Jessica had made sure of that. Your Honor, Rick Morrison said, his voice booming in the quiet room. This is a tragedy. A simple, heartbreaking tragedy. He gestured dramatically toward Jessica, who produced a perfect quiet sob right on cue. We are here because my client, a grieving, penniless widow, is being harassed. Harassed by this woman. He pointed at me. Margaret Chen. A woman who we have recently discovered is not a simple seamstress, but a wealthy real estate investor. A woman of considerable hidden power and influence. He let those words hang in the air. He was already playing his game. This is a case of pure greed, Your Honor. Mrs. Margaret Chen is using the death of her own son to persecute her daughter-in-law. And I must say, the dynamics here are disturbing. A powerful, wealthy older woman with teams of lawyers using her influence to intimidate and evict a vulnerable young widow from her home. I watched the judge, Judge Patricia Huang, an older woman, sharp as a tack, with eyes that looked like they'd heard every lie ever told. She didn't even blink. She just looked bored. Rick Morrison continued his performance. My client is the victim here, Your Honor. All she wants is the home her loving husband gave her. This is nothing short of elder abuse in reverse, and we demand justice. He sat down, looking very pleased with himself. The reporter was scribbling frantically in her notebook. Judge Huang looked at us. Her voice was tired, unimpressed. Ms. Chong, your response. Linda stood up. She was the picture of calm professionalism. Your Honor, Mr. Morrison is correct about one thing. This is indeed a tragedy. But it is not the tragedy he's describing. She picked up the forged deed from our table. He has filed suit to claim ownership of the property at 428 Grant Avenue, Unit 3B. He claims his client is a victim. Linda placed the paper back down. We are not here to debate ownership of that apartment, Your Honor. In fact, we move for immediate summary dismissal of this entire case. Rick Morrison shot up from his chair like he'd been electrocuted. On what grounds? We have a deed. It's a valid legal document. Judge Huang fixed him with a cold stare. Sit down, Mr. Morrison. You'll get your turn to speak. She looked back at Linda. On what grounds, Ms. Chong? Linda's voice was clear and sharp as broken glass. On the grounds that this lawsuit is frivolous, Your Honor. The grantor, Mr. Daniel Chen, had no legal authority to sign that deed, because neither he nor his mother, my client, owns that property. Rick Morrison's mouth dropped open. What? That's impossible. The property at 428 Grant Avenue, Unit 3B, Linda continued, like all of Mrs. Chen's properties, was placed into a protected, irrevocable trust, the Margaret and Thomas Chen Family Trust. Established 15 years ago. Mrs. Margaret Chen is the beneficiary. I am the executive administrator. Daniel Chen could not give away an apartment he did not own. Jessica's lawyer looked like he'd been slapped. That's not possible. We ran a title search. The property is listed under Margaret Chen. A common mistake for a careless lawyer, Linda said, her voice cutting and sharp. You ran a cheap online search. You didn't check the asset transfer documents filed in San Francisco County. Case number 2009-7743. It's all public record. If you had bothered to do your job properly, counselor, you would have known your client's deed is worthless. Rick Morrison was white as a sheet. He looked at Jessica, his face a mask of panic and betrayal. He just realized his client had lied to him. Had made him look like a fool in front of a judge. Judge Huang looked at him over her reading glasses. Is this true, Mr. Morrison? Did you verify the trust filings? Rick stammered. We were not aware of any. The judge slammed her gavel. The sound cracked through the room like a gunshot. Then this case is dismissed. We're done here. Jessica looked at Rick. Her face twisted in confusion and rage. What does that mean? What just happened? Rick was already packing his briefcase, his hands shaking. It means you lost. The apartment isn't yours. It never was. But Linda wasn't finished. She didn't sit down. Your Honor, she said, before we're dismissed, I need to address something. Mr. Morrison, on behalf of his client, has publicly accused my client of harassment and abuse. He did this on television. He did it again in this courtroom. My client's reputation has been severely damaged. The truth must be entered into the public record. Judge Huang sighed. Ms. Chong, the case is dismissed. I understand, Your Honor, Linda said, her voice firm. But the reason for this fraudulent deed is now part of an active criminal investigation. Press is here. The public is watching. The truth deserves to be heard. The judge looked at the reporter, then at me, then back at Linda. You have 3 minutes, Ms. Chong. Make them count. Linda smiled. Thank you, Your Honor. She turned slightly, facing not just the judge but the entire courtroom. Mr. Morrison claims his client is a penniless widow. He's half right. She is penniless. But not because my client is greedy. Linda held up a new file. She's penniless because she has a $215,000 gambling debt owed to Mr. Marco Delgado, a known loan shark operating out of Los Angeles. Jessica gasped out loud. Rick Morrison tried to object, but the judge waved him silent. She was desperate, Linda continued, which is why she forged the deed. She couldn't ask her husband for money. Why? Because Mr. Daniel Chen had just served her with these. Linda held up the divorce papers. A petition for dissolution of marriage. He was leaving her. A wave of shocked murmurs went through the courtroom. The reporter was writing so fast her hand was a blur. Jessica Chen was about to be divorced, exposed, and left with nothing but massive debts. Daniel knew exactly who he married, which is why 4 days before he died, he signed a new will. Linda held up the third document. A will that explicitly disinherits his wife, Jessica, and leaves 100% of his personal estate to his mother, Margaret Chen. The room erupted in shocked gasps and whispers. Jessica finally found her voice. It wasn't a whisper. It was a raw animal scream. Liar! You're a liar. He loved me. He would never do that. Judge Huang slammed her gavel again and again. Order! Order in this court. Mrs. Chen, control yourself or I will have you removed. Linda waited. She waited until Jessica's screams turned into hysterical, gasping sobs. Then her voice dropped, became deadly quiet. But it carried to every corner of that packed courtroom. She's right about one thing, Your Honor. Daniel isn't here to tell us what happened. She made sure of that. Objection! Rick yelled, on his feet. Slander! My client is the victim here. It's not slander, Linda said, when it's based on evidence, Your Honor. Because of this clear financial motive, the divorce, the disinheritance, the massive debt, we petitioned the state for a full autopsy. We had Daniel Chen's body exhumed last week. Jessica froze. Her sobs stopped instantly. She looked up, her face a mask of pure terror. Linda held up the last, thickest file. I have here the final report from the San Francisco County Medical Examiner. Daniel Chen did not die of natural kidney failure. His kidneys were severely damaged, yes, but not from disease. I watched Jessica. Her eyes were wide. She wasn't breathing. He died, Linda announced, her voice ringing clear through the silent courtroom. From acute poisoning. Specifically, ethylene glycol poisoning. Antifreeze. Administered in small doses over a period of approximately 3 weeks. A slow, agonizing, deliberate poisoning. Linda Hayes, my protector, my husband's legacy, turned from the judge. She looked directly at Jessica. Her voice rang out. Clear. Final. You didn't just lose the apartment, Jessica. You murdered him. Jessica collapsed. It wasn't a faint. It was a complete breakdown. A wail came out of her. A sound of pure, damned guilt. No. Well. He's lying. They're all lying. Rick Morrison just sat there. His career flashing before his eyes. And then I saw them. The same 2 detectives who had visited my apartment days ago. Detective Maria Santos and Detective James Park. They had been standing quietly at the back of the courtroom the entire time. They began to walk forward. They walked past the gasping reporter, past the shocked crowd, right up to the defense table where Jessica was sobbing hysterically. It was her. It was the old lady. She set me up. She framed me. She killed her own son. Detective Santos put her hand on Jessica's shoulder. Jessica Marie Chen, you are under arrest for the first-degree murder of Daniel Thomas Chen. The reporter's camera flashed. Blinding white light. Jessica screamed as they pulled her to her feet. twisted her arms behind her back, snapped the handcuffs on her wrists. She did this. The old woman did this. She's the murderer, not me. But no one was listening. They dragged her out of the courtroom, her screams echoing down the marble hallway until they faded to nothing. I just sat there, next to Linda. I watched her go. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel relief. I just felt quiet. Me. I looked at the empty chair where my son's killer had just been sitting. And for the first time since Daniel's funeral, I felt the ice in my chest begin to crack, begin to melt. Justice, Thomas, I thought, looking up toward heaven. I kept my promise. Justice for our boy. It was 4 months before I could walk back into my apartment on Grant Avenue. 4 months of legal depositions, of signing papers, of listening to the ugly details of Jessica's trial, of hearing how she'd slowly poisoned my Daniel with antifreeze in his morning coffee for 3 weeks. The media circus had finally died down. The cameras were gone. The reporters moved on to other stories. The apartment was quiet. Too quiet. I had asked Linda to meet me there. The police had removed all their tape weeks ago, but I hadn't been able to bring myself to go inside. Today I finally did. It smelled stale, like a place that had been locked up with sadness for too long. But it was clean. Linda had hired a cleaning service to come in and put everything back in order. She was sitting at my kitchen table, the one Thomas built with his own hands, sipping a cup of tea. She looked tired, but she smiled when I walked in. "It's good to see you home, Margaret," she said softly. I nodded, my throat tight with emotion. I walked over to the small shelf on the wall. The photos were still there. Me and Thomas on our wedding day. Daniel at age 5, holding up a fish he'd caught. That big, gap-toothed smile on his face. "She'll never get out, you know," Linda said to my back. The state's case was airtight. First-degree murder with special circumstances. Financial gain. Premeditation. They'll never grant her parole. She's going to die in prison. I touched the frame of Daniel's photo with gentle fingers. "A life for a life," I said quietly. "Seems like everyone loses." I turned and sat down across from her. The kitchen looked just as I'd left it, except for a large roll of papers spread out on the table. Blueprints. Linda looked at them, then at me. "So what are you going to do now, Margaret? With all of this?" "All of this," I repeated, looking around my small, simple apartment. This little place was what Jessica had killed for. This tiny piece of wood and plaster. I looked back at the picture of my son. "The hardest part," I said, my voice rough with emotion, "the part that haunts me every single night, is that she did all of it. The lies. The forgery. Poison. She did it all for this." I tapped the table. "This little apartment. Maybe worth $200,000. She murdered my boy for pocket change." I looked at Linda. She had no idea, did she? She was married to the heir of $12 million. And she killed him for pennies. "She was ignorant, Margaret," Linda said. "And she was consumed by greed. It's a deadly combination." "All that money," I said, shaking my head. "All those years Thomas and I worked, saving every penny, buying property, building for the future, building for Daniel. And the only thing Jessica could see was the one thing right in front of her nose." I was quiet for a long time. The only sound was the old clock on the wall. The same clock that had ticked through Daniel's entire childhood. Linda pointed to the blueprints on the table. "You've been busy." "I've been thinking," I said. "Thinking about what Thomas wanted. Protect our work," he told me. I thought he meant I should protect the money. The buildings. The investments. But I was wrong, Linda. I've been wrong for 15 years. "What do you mean?" Linda asked. I unrolled the blueprints. They weren't for an apartment. They were for a large open building. Wide doors, high ceilings, rows of workstations and sewing machines. "He didn't mean the money," I said. "He meant the work itself. The value of it. The dignity of it. The pride in creating something with your own hands." I looked out my small kitchen window, past my tiny balcony, toward the neighborhood I'd lived in my whole life, toward the young people I saw on the corners with nothing to do. No opportunities, no hope. Kids who looked just like Daniel did once upon a time. "Linda," I said, turning back to her, my voice steady now, filled with new purpose. "I want you to start the process. Begin liquidating the non-essential commercial properties. Sell the building on Market Street. Sell the warehouse in Soma. We have enough." Linda raised an eyebrow. "Enough for what, Margaret? Are you planning to retire to Hawaii?" Smiled. The first real, genuine smile I'd felt in months. It felt strange on my face, but good. "No," I said. "I'm staying right here. It's time to finally use the Chen Family Trust for what it was meant for." I tapped the blueprints. "I'm going to build a community center. Right here in this neighborhood. Place for these kids. But not just a place to play basketball. I'm going to build a workshop. A state-of-the-art sewing and tailoring center. Free for any young person in San Francisco who wants to learn a trade. Who wants to learn how to create something with their hands instead of getting into trouble on the streets." Linda looked at the plans, then back at me, and I saw her professional mask melt away. I saw the little girl who used to play with Daniel on these very streets. She was smiling, tears in her eyes. "We'll teach them how to cut fabric," I said, my voice growing stronger, a new sense of purpose settling into my bones. How to use a sewing machine, how to design patterns, how to take pride in their work, how to feel that satisfaction when you've made something real, something beautiful, something that lasts. "What are you going to call it?" Linda asked, her voice thick with emotion. I looked back at the shelf, at my boy with his gap-toothed smile, holding up that fish like it was the greatest treasure in the world. "We're going to call it Daniel's Workshop," I said. "Thomas and I spent 40 years building assets, Linda. Building wealth. It's time to stop building assets. It's time to start building futures." I looked back at Linda. If there's one thing I've learned from this nightmare, it's this. Never underestimate the quiet person. The world is full of people like Jessica. People who measure your worth by your car or your clothes or how much noise you make. They're loud. They're arrogant. And they're blind. But true strength, I said, true wealth is built in silence. It's built on character, on patience, on loyalty, on hard work. "Greed always overplays its hand," I continued. "It destroys itself from the inside. But the truth just waits patiently, quietly, in the shadows, ready for its moment to shine." I stood up and walked to the window, looked out at my neighborhood, my city, the place Thomas and I had loved and invested in for 40 years. "Thank you for listening to my story," I said softly. More to myself than to Linda. "Now I have a question for all of you watching." I turned from the window. What would you have done if you were in my shoes? Would you have seen the warning signs in Jessica? Have you ever felt underestimated by someone who only saw your surface and missed who you truly were? Let me know your thoughts and where you're watching from in the comments below. Your stories give me strength. Please don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Granny's Voice. We share stories about standing up for what's right, about protecting what matters, about justice that comes quietly but surely, so I can continue sharing these journeys with you. The afternoon sun came through my kitchen window, warm and golden. Linda stood up and hugged me, a long, tight hug. "Thomas would be so proud of you, Margaret," she whispered. "And Daniel is watching over you. I know he is." I held her tight. Let myself cry for the first time in months. Not tears of grief this time. Tears of release, purpose, of hope. When we finally pulled apart, I looked around my small apartment one more time. This place that had held so much love, so much laughter, so much pain. "Let's go," I said to Linda. "We have work to do. Daniel's Workshop isn't going to build itself." And together we walked out of that apartment, out into the San Francisco sunshine, ready to turn tragedy into something beautiful. Ready to honor my son's memory not with tears, but with action. Ready to build a future for kids who needed someone to believe in them. Just like Thomas and I once needed someone to believe in us. This is Margaret Rose Chen signing off. Remember, the quiet ones are always watching, always learning, always preparing. And when the time comes, we don't make noise. We make moves. Thank you for being part of my story. Until next time, stay strong, stay kind, and never, ever let anyone make you feel small. 'Cause you are mighty, even if the world can't see it yet. Goodbye for now.